It's preparing. Redirecting to YouTube.
Oh, I can view it on YouTube.
And then it said video unavailable. This video is private. Can you see it?
Indeed, I do.
Perfect.
Well,
What?
I'm changing it to unlisted. That means anybody with the link can view it.
Okay.
I'm changing it to unlisted. Oh, jeez. Jenna, can you share your screen again?
Does that look okay?
Looks good.
Still waiting on, there's like a 20-second lag.
For the YouTube live? That shouldn't matter too much when you like watch it back, right?
It doesn't matter. It's just I'm still watching.
Oh, I see.
I'm still watching me asking Jenna to share her screen. Okay. See, this is where it's a problem, because what it does is it shows the PowerPoint and the only person's head that we see is mine.
Because you're speaking?
Yeah. Or it's picking up noise from my mic.
But ideally, like once it starts, won't Jenna be speaking? So she'll be there?
Ideally. And now here you are, because you're crunching your
Oh, great. A cucumber.
Sorry, I just stopped my share for a second.
If
Welcome,
it's
everybody. We'll get started
possible,
in a couple seconds. And by seconds, I mean minutes, as soon as Sam figures out.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Are you able to mute everybody except the presenter?
Probably. One moment.
We could just do that, and then nobody would show up there who's not supposed to be there.
Yeah.
right, we'll give it just a couple more minutes for people to trickle in. Okay, for some reason my laptop clock is always a couple minutes behind, but I'm seeing by my watch that it's 5 after, so I think we'll start. Welcome everybody to Manna's Breaking Bread for January. For those of you that haven't been here before, I'll just give a little summary of what Breaking Bread is and what our purpose here is. So it is a time and space that we reserve, usually the third Wednesday of every month. This month we shifted it a bit because there was a big event happening last Wednesday at this time. And we use it to discuss the root causes of food insecurity, and in doing so to come up with together new solutions to this problem and figure out new ways to promote a food secure Montgomery County. When we think of the root causes of food insecurity, we most often think about the systemic racism that is embedded in many sectors of our society. And today we're going to explore the ways that this has shaped our agricultural system. This is part of a two-parter, so we'll do this today and have a continuation of it next month on the third Wednesday. And we're calling this series, Systems Seated in Racism Need to Be Uprooted. So today we'll focus on how the agricultural system is seated in racism and the impacts of that for today's farmers and producers and us as consumers. And next month, we'll focus on the uprooting part of that. And in recognition of Black History Month, we'll celebrate the contributions of Black people to the agricultural system in this country and highlight some of the local organizations and efforts that are making a positive change. So today we'll deal with the harsh history and realities, and next month we'll get to celebrate. For those of you that also have been here before, you'll know that I am not your typical facilitator. So the Breaking Bread effort at Manna has changed hands. So my name is Jenna Umbriak. I realized I didn't even introduce myself. And I'm the director of the programs team here at Manna. And the Breaking Bread initiative now rests with our team. So you'll see we have a few members of the programs team on the call today. And I'll particularly want to shout out Wynn Ebner, who is our kind of Zoom controller for the day. So thank you, Wynn. And in fact, if you, for some reason, have some technology issue or need to chat at somebody from Manna, you can chat at Wynn. Or Sam Miller, who's our communications manager, who's also on the call. So you can send them a direct message in the chat if you need something from them. And one thing we won't change this time around is that we will start in the way that we always do, which is to open it up for people to take a moment to share something new and good in their lives. This is a tradition we started a few years ago, and we like the tone that it sets for the beginning of potentially some uncomfortable and serious conversation. So feel free to put it in the chat, something new and good. If you are comfortable sharing with the larger group, just raise your hand and we'll make some time for that right now. was going to say, I will call on people. Jackie, what's new and good?
I love postcards. I loved postcards before email, but even now more, since we're so digital, and I'm not even talking COVID, just our society. I love sending postcards to people. I love writing notes to people. And I did that recently on a staycation to Cambridge, Maryland. And I found out one of my coworkers, Martia Dennis, I sent her the picture of a bird and she was like, I've seen that bird. I've seen that bird in Seneca Park. And we didn't even know that we both liked birds watching. And so now I've shared with her the Audubon app, which, by the way, if you use your smartphone and you want help identifying birds, Audubon has a free app. So it's new and good that I have a colleague I can talk to birds with, and it's new and good that postcards are still a meaningful thing.
Thank you. You got some love for postcards. Tracy?
I thought that last week's inauguration was beautiful from beginning to end. I truly enjoyed watching last Wednesday.
Thank you for sharing that. And Catherine, I think you had your hand up. Catherine Kopp.
Have to unmute. Yes, this is my first, maybe my second time, but certainly my first virtual time here. And I'm just very happy to feel like, speaking of the inauguration, I have energy, emotional, intellectual, to devote to some other things, including this. And I was prompted by my 34-year-old daughter who lives in New York, who is in a sort of not strictly food insecurity discussion group, but you know, I learned from my daughter and thought, anyway, I'll try not to go on and on. Jackie knows I can. And it's not even about birds. So that's it. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, welcome. We're glad that you're here. And I see that Ellie wrote in the chat that she's now the grandmother of a precious little girl, Avery Ella, named for both of her great grandmothers. Thank you for sharing that, Ellie, and congratulations.
Well, I'll follow up on that theme of Ellie's. Oh, first of all, I'm Carolyn Camacho, and this is my first time here. Happy to be here. I'm with Identity, and I'm going to be a grandma, so that struck a chord with me.
Awesome. Congrats. Thanks, Carolyn. Anybody else? We have time for maybe one more share. And of course, you can keep putting them in the chat. Oh, is that Katie?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name's Katie. I'm a dietetic intern, and this is also my first time here. Speaking of grandmothers, it is almost my grandmother's 90th birthday, so I'm very excited about that.
Well, happy birthday to your grandmother. Jackie knows that I'm very adept at sending text messages if anyone would like me to wish their relative a happy birthday, because I was trying to write to my own relative, my Aunt Jackie, last evening, and inadvertently sent Jackie DeCarlo a happy birthday, even though if anyone would like to know, Jackie's birthday is in November. So I was either very late or very early. Thank you all for sharing. It's so nice to have this time to connect as humans before we get into the discussion. So let me tell you what today holds. Thank you again for being here. So first, we'll dive into a little bit of a history lesson. I am not a historian, but we're going to do a brief summary of some research that I've done, and shout out to interns that are working with MANA right now, Katie Lazurka and Hannah Lundeen, who are both here. They helped me with that research that you'll see in a second. And also Jackie Arnold from the Montgomery County Office of Agriculture. So she also assisted. And then after that, we hope to have time for a couple, or just a breakout session. So we'll put you into breakout groups. We'll try that for a conversation about our history lesson. And then at around 12:45, we hope to be joined by Tope Fajin Bessie. I'm going to get her name right before she signs in, I promise. And she is the co-owner of Dodo Farms, which is a farm here in Montgomery County. County. She's also a CPA, and she's also a professor at the University of Maryland College Park. So we're so glad that she has come to talk to us about this topic. So we'll have her join later. And then at the end, as we always do, we'll have time for you all to make some commitments based on what you heard today, how you in your community will take some action on what we've discussed. So that's how we'll run it, and we'll start with this brief history lesson. All right, can you all see this? Will one person unmute and tell me yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. Now, if only I could, there we are. Okay, so this is the timeline we're going to talk through. This is, of course, not comprehensive, but I think that it will prove to give a few highlights as to the historic systemic racism and also the systemic racism that still exists in our agricultural system, and will form a good foundation for us to talk about what the implications are for present day. So we'll start way back in the 1400s, and this idea called the Doctrine of Discovery, which was a belief espoused by the Catholic Church that really legitimized the enslavement of non-Christian people by Christians. Additionally, we think of the origins of this kind of colonial imperialism rooted in this concept of manifest destiny, which was, as you can see, a school of thought dating back to 1845 that basically said that white men were destined by God to spread capitalism and democracy across the land. And both of these helped justify the stealing of land from indigenous peoples in the 19th and 21st century. So this is kind of our attempt at giving, like, what is the root of this, this posture that we had, or white people had, towards non-white people at the time. And then we're going to jump to Civil War era, of course, a really impactful and transformative moment in our country's history, thinking about the Homestead Act of 1862. So in this act, US citizens were given the ability to claim about 160 acres of surveyed government land. So it was an effort by the government to start develop undeveloped land, and it was, people were asked to improve the land that they were homesteading upon. To make a claim, homesteaders had to pay a filing fee of $18. It's so interesting to me to think about the cost of real estate back then. $10 to make a temporary claim on the land, $2 for commission to the land agent, and an additional $6 final payment to receive an official patent on the land. So there was definitely some money that had to be put down. And in the end, most homesteaders actually lived quite close to the land that they purchased, and not many people could afford to do the kind of improvements that were expected of them. Jumping forward a little bit to this field, it's called Field Order 15 of 1864. And this was the result of a meeting that was held between William Sherman, who was a Union general leader, and 20 Black ministers. And the result was a promise that people would get, and the shorthand for this has been 40 acres and a mule, particularly to help get land to newly freed slaves. After the Emancipation Proclamation, which was in 1863. And for a while, it seemed to be working. Black families began to settle on this land, but unfortunately, government recognition of this act lost favor. And President Andrew Johnson, who became president in 1865, actually ordered the land to be returned to its previous owners. And the former slaves, now freed people who had been on the land, using the land, had to either sign labor contracts with planters or be evicted and have nowhere to go. So with the increase in vagrancy and homelessness came the crackdown on that. And that leads to the crackdown on things like vagrancy is an example of these black codes that were put into effect around 1865 and 1866. And these were basically restrictive laws designed to maintain plantation agriculture and that economy that was so prevalent in the South. Here are some examples of some of the codes that were enacted in some southern states. You can see the example here in Mississippi, where they required Black people to have written evidence of employment, which was difficult to come by. And then in South Carolina, a law that basically prohibited Black people from holding any occupation other than farmer or servant, unless they actually paid for a license to take on those other occupations. So it was, effectively a way to keep people slaves even after they were legally freed. And it's interesting to think about what the motives of people who were trying to enact these sorts of laws, why would they be interested beyond the, why would they be interested in restricting African Americans' freedom? It was because as soon as they were in prison, they could be leased out to mines, to railroads, back to the plantation. And in fact, I found this stat astonishing. From 1866 to 1868, 73% of Arkansas's state budget came from the act of leasing Black people back to plantations. And this was really a way, again, of keeping that Southern economy intact for white people. And as I mentioned, the motivation of really getting back to that plantation type of agriculture, the evolution of it really became sharecropping. And so sharecropping is, as it would suggest, it's when not only African American families, there were also white sharecroppers who would be able to rent small plots of land in exchange for giving the owner of that land a share of their crops. So when we think back to rescinding the 40-acre promise that we talked about a few seconds ago, that really prevented people from becoming fully independent from their former masters. They were legally free, but they were prevented from becoming financially free. If you think about it, if the 4 million people forced into sharecropping had owned their land, they could have started earning income and eventually would have been able to put aside assets for the future, start to accumulate wealth. But sharecropping's continual debt cycle made it nearly impossible to get enough to eat, let alone earn money, save money. Sharecropping continued actually for 3 generations. The families that participated in sharecropping were often hungry and or poorly nourished, far more likely to live in poverty than white people, and far less able to accumulate wealth, as I've said. And though both white and Black sharecroppers were at the bottom of the social ladder, sharecroppers actually began to organize for better working rights in the 1930s. And along with that and the Great Depression, mechanization, and other factors, sharecropping actually started to fade away in the 1940s. And still, with all of that I've mentioned thus far, by 1910, Black people were able to acquire 16 million acres of land. And by 1920, 14% of all farms were Black-led. And that's particularly astounding when you think that African Americans at the time were just 10% of the population. So despite all of the laws not working in their favor, this was the truth, at least in 1910 to the 1920s. And this may not be a surprise to many. There was backlash when there was this progress made. One of the most significant problems when legal slavery ended was that Blacks were still at risk of having their land seized with or without any pretext or stated reason. White landowners could arbitrarily accuse Black farmers or business owners of being in debt and take their land or property. Black people often could not fight these allegations since they were legally barred from bringing white people to court. Property taken from African Americans might include a 40-acre farm, a general store, or housing. And these losses were devastating to families struggling to overcome the legacy of slavery. Some property seizures were intended to terrorize African Americans, and Black farmers were subject to a lot of violence, beatings, killing, lynchings, and theft of that property. So this continued violence towards African Americans in the South was really one of the reasons for the movement to the North known as the Great Migration. Other factors that contributed to this movement were when World War I broke out in 1914, industrialized urban areas in the North, Midwest, and West faced a shortage of industrial laborers. So recruiters often enticed African Americans to come north with promise of higher wages for these industrial jobs. And by the end of 1919, about 1 million Black people had already left the South. But things weren't, of course, perfect in the North either. Rising rents in segregated areas, plus the resurgence of Klan activity, worsened relations across the country, and race riots were prevalent at that time. And in speaking about segregation and the worsening of it, one of the biggest factors to that was redlining. And redlining is a practice by the Federal Housing Administration that effectively robbed African Americans from accumulating generational wealth. And it was, they were barring Black people from getting mortgages in and acquiring housing in particular neighborhoods. You can kind of see from this map on the right. In the mid to late 1930s, under the New Deal and worker protection policies under FDR, were coming into play Social Security, minimum wage, but unfortunately these protections were not extended in many cases to farmers and domestic workers. And of course, a disproportionate number of African Americans had these two professions. Later, Social Security was extended to more people in this profession, but you can sort of see it's just more less protections, which was aligned with all of the rest of what we talked about, I think, to this point. And when we think about some of the longstanding results of the Great Migration that was happening throughout this entire time, there was increased housing tensions. And because of that, many Black people ended up creating their own cities within larger cities, fostering the growth of urban African American culture. And there was a lot of political activism among African Americans at this time. But something else I read, and I put a question mark here because I haven't really corroborated it, but there was, at this point, people started to talk about the fact that for Black farmers in particular, the USDA was preventing Black people from getting loans. They were delaying them. They were not giving them loans at all. There was some speculation by one of the journalists I read that this was a tool to punish civil rights activity that was responding to the discrimination and racism we were seeing. I don't know if that's true, but it is true that the USDA was was practicing discriminatory practices towards loans for Black farmers. And I'm sorry, slides got a little bit out of order there. I'm going to skip this for a second and talk about, since we're talking about the USDA and its loans, this had been going on, I think, before the 1980s, but it became having a bigger presence in the news in the early 1980s, and then culminated with this lawsuit, the Pickford versus Glickman lawsuit in 1999. And this alleged that between 1981 and 96, the USDA disproportionately denied or delayed loans and denied crop disaster payments to Black farmers and failed to investigate or properly respond to complaints that were made. The lawsuit Pickford won, because there was a Pickford 2 in 2008 that we'll talk about in a second, actually paid out $1 billion to 13,000 Black farmers. But these were one-time settlement payments, and there was a lot of criticism that this did not make up for the many, many years of lack of loans. In addition, there was some thought that there were a lot of farmers who felt they were wrongfully disqualified from getting the settlement money or denied because of late applications. So in 2008, under Tom Vilsack, who will be the Secretary of Agriculture again, it seems, under the new administration, he tried in the 2008 Farm Bill to allocate an additional $100 million to settle the claims that were wrongfully denied from the first. They were able to do that in 2008. He actually tried again in 2010 to find even more money to make things, to settle additional claims, but that funding was actually not approved by Congress. So the Pickford legislation is really just one example of the enduring legacy of racism in agriculture and land ownership. And another one is this concept of heirs property. And this is the fact that property was passed down through generations without a will or without necessary paperwork or the deeds to the property. And so landowners that have their land under this sort of questionable ownership, they may not be able to get loans through the USDA. And additionally, they're vulnerable to laws that allow speculators and developers to acquire the property. One of the lawyers who was quoted in some of the articles we read called this the worst problem you've never heard of. And there are many articles, heartbreaking articles about people who have had to give up land that had been their family for generations because they just did not have the essential paperwork to back it up. And this stat is astounding to me that a 2001 report from the US Ag Census estimated that about 80% of Black-owned farmland had disappeared in the South since 1969, and approximately half of that land was lost through partition sales because of heirs property issues. So you can see that the impact of these policies extends into present day. It was this quote that I have at the top of this slide that really inspired this conversation. I read that, as you can see here, that we had talked about in 1920, nearly 1 million Black farmers worked on 41.4 million acres of land. Today, only about 49,000 of them remain, making up just 1.4% of the nation's farm owners and tending a scant 4.7 million acres. That same day that I read this article, there was a piece on the radio on NPR's Marketplace discussing the issue, very present day issue of Black farmers being paid less for their products at market. And I looked into that a little bit and read an article about a Black farmer who asks his wife, who has a white stepfather, when the white stepfather goes to the market to sell his soybeans, he always gets the prime cost for it. But whenever he goes as a Black farmer, he gets the prices are docked. So that's one of the practices that's still happening today. And so lastly, before we transition the discussion, I wanted to find out what the situation is right here in Montgomery County today. And so this is where Jackie from the Office of Ag was kind enough to look into this, the Ag Census data that shows by my calculations that 90 or so percentage of the farmers in Montgomery County identify as white, and you can see about 2% identify as Black or African American. So still very much a disparity there in the amount of ownership of farms in Montgomery County. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. So I realized that was a lot, and I do want to, at this point, we're going to break out into some breakout groups for about 10 minutes or so. And I want you to, in your breakout groups, we'll talk about the following questions. So first, was there anything in that surprised you? Anything that you didn't know before that you heard about for the first time? You can talk about anything that was missing, something that you know about from our history that wasn't covered. And then lastly, what do you think any of the implications are for today's food system or for us today? And I think wins, I'm going to look at when to set up the breakout groups. They'll just be random. And then we'll call you back in about 10 minutes for the next part of our presentation.
Jenna, how many people per group would you like?
How many people do we have? 33. So maybe about 4 or 5.
Okay.
Let's do 5.
Great. All right, I'm going to open all rooms now.
So glad to see you, Win. I didn't know where you went. You're muted. I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Never mind.
Welcome, Tope. You made it.
I
And
did.
right on time.
Oh my Lord, I came straight from class. I'm sorry. Please.
I see that. Did you like run across the quad? With your-
I ran across the Zooms.
Well, we're just pulling people back in from their breakout rooms. So people were discussing the history lesson that I attempted to give them, history being my least favorite subject. So I did my best.
I'm so sad I missed the juicy part.
Okay. But once everybody's back, I'll just turn it over to you.
Oof.
Is that all right? Do you need a breather? Should we have, yeah. Okay. It looks like almost everybody's back. We may have lost a couple people in that Zoom void between breakout room and main room. But welcome back. I hope that was a fruitful conversation, and we'll have some time after our next speaker to have a little bit more discussion. But without further ado, straight from class, we have Tope Fajing Besi.
Okay.
I'm glad you weren't here to hear me say it earlier on my first attempt. So Tope, as I mentioned, she is a CPA. She is a professor, and she is the co-owner of Dodo Farms in Montgomery County. So we're so glad that she is here to give us perspective on this topic we've been discussing today. So Tope, to you.
All right. So
oh, look at you.
I'd better change the background since I'm no longer in College Park. I'm now in Montgomery County in a farm somewhere. But good afternoon, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I am honored to be able to share some of my experience being a farmer who is female, who is Nigerian, before being American, and who is Black, as you can see, and who is Muslim. A farmer that is a bit different from many farmers that people see on a day-to-day basis. So the first thing that I'll say is, in addition to owning Dodo Farms with my husband in Montgomery County, I also teach agricultural business at the University of Maryland, College Park. So every time I'm talking to my students about business, I always tell them that people don't buy products. People don't buy services. People buy people. So if people buy people, how then can this be a challenge? If you are a farmer who is selling your produce or who is doing any kind of business and you are personable, people like you, like, how then can this be a problem? Well, it's a problem if you are different from what people typically see. So one of the first challenges that I want to talk about is lack of allies and how people on here can be better allies to people who don't look like them, seem like them in any way, shape, or form. One of my experiences, or again, my experiences might not be the same as yours. So I'm only going to share my own lived experiences. When we were going to start our farm we wanted to start in 2017, but we didn't start until 2018. And when we were going to start the farm, I had been in America at that time for maybe about 15, 16 years, but my husband was just like barely a year in the US. And because I had promised him that if he came to the US, he could farm. And I made that promise without knowing anything about farming, without thinking it was possible. But I thought if I told him that, he would come instead of me having to move to Nigeria. So there he was. And then we had to find the difficult thing of, you think is land, and I'll talk about land in a minute, but land was not the most difficult part of farming for us. It was looking for allies, people who would believe in you, so they could give you a chance to be in a farmer's market. People who would believe in you so they would buy from you. People who would believe in you so they could even vouch for you when you need that vouching. We were connected to our land that we're on now through the Montgomery Countryside Alliance. They own a website called the Montgomery Land Link. And I'll never forget us going to the landlord's place in April 2018. And she said, I'm not going to take any money from you. You can have this land free. And we still have the land free till today. You can have the land free, 4-year lease. However, I'm going to call Robert. If he says what you want to do is possible, then I'm going to let you use my land. Because the part of the land that we're using is forward facing. Like, you get into the 23-acre property and the first thing you would see is our space. So if we mess it up, her entire house is messed up. So she was going to call somebody that we didn't know, that didn't know us, but she wanted the person to hear what we were saying and tell her if it's possible, if it's doable, if it's feasible. So this man came and we gave him our spiel and he said, oh, I think they can do it. And that taught me something in terms of like, how do you get people to believe you? Now I'm going to attempt to slay the elephant in the room. And I'm sure you guys have talked about this before. It's going to be race. For a white person, and please, please, please forgive me if you find this offensive, but I'm going to just say this. In my 19 years in America, for a white person, when they say, I'm going to call somebody to see if what you're saying is possible, I'm not sure you would have the fear that me, a Black person, who is wearing a hijab, who, when people look at her, they think about ISIS or Al-Qaeda or Al-Shabaab or insert every other terrorist organization you've seen on CNN. Immediately somebody says that, my heart is beating like crazy. I'm thinking they're not going to give me a chance. But thankfully, we saw somebody who didn't know us, but didn't see our color, didn't see my hijab, didn't hear my accent, didn't see my husband's foreign passport, didn't see all of those and give us a chance. But my sisters and my brothers on this call, that is not the experience of many people who look like us. And it's not even about just getting land or getting people to vouch for you. It's also about access to capital. It is a fact that if I'm Black, if I want to sell my house and I'm not in this house and I stage it with the best realtor ever, and God help me, I don't remove my pictures that show that I'm Black. Don't remove my unruly hair and all of these things that give me away. My house will not sell for as much as your house if you're not Black. That is it. It's a true story. It is true. That if I walk into a bank and I convince the person that, oh my God, this is the best thing agriculture has ever seen. The fact that my name is hard to pronounce and it gives me away as somebody who is not from here. And then you see me and then you look at me, I would lose allies. So this is the number one big challenge that I found for people like me. And that allyship happens in the farmers markets. We sell at DuPont Circle Farmers Market. And I know that we sell very good stuff, but there are people who would walk right through us who will not stop. Because you would only buy from the farmer that you trust. And you seeing me, you hearing me immediately, for many people, for a lot of people, even in a place as diverse as DC, Maryland, they're like, no, I'm not buying from them. They don't even say it. But that thought moves them away. So allies, the biggest challenge that we have as Black people, as Muslim, as women, as, I always tell my nieces and my nephews who are Americans who live abroad, I tell them, I say, especially for the ones who are female, I said, when you cross the hurdle of your name sounding crazy, when they pick out your resume, when they pick out your application, in spite of the fact that your name sounds crazy, then they call you for an interview and they're like, oh, oops. Okay, let's say you jump that barrier. Then you open your mouth, like, where are you coming from? Then God help you. If you say, oh, I cannot come that day because it's a Muslim holiday. Oh, you are a terrorist. We have to be better allies. We have to check our biases. Whether we are people of color or we are people not of color. The second problem that I've seen, the second challenge, is lack of capacity. And I say this, one of my ambitions in life is to work for the USDA. It's one of my big ambitions in life. So if you know anybody who can put me in the USDA, please tell them that I'm looking for a job. And the job I want is to work in the small business, minority business, small women, minority, young farmers, anybody who can help them. Because I think the USDA is the biggest agency that discriminates when it comes to capacity. You come with CFAP 1 and CFAP 2. Lovely ideas. So they came with CFAP 1. If you were familiar with the coronavirus assistance that USDA did last year, I'm a CPA. I've been an accountant for 23 years. I am chartered in Nigeria. I am certified in the US. So you cannot scare me with business paperwork. No, I would eat it for dessert. And I struggled to complete the CFAP 1. I struggled. It was insane. It took me hours. And then every single piece of paper that I filled out, I was like, these people are trying to chase away and discourage people like me. Who are people like me? People like me are those who, you are the farmer, as well as the business manager, as well as the salesperson, as well as the finance manager, as well as the operations manager, as well as the mechanic, as well as you're everything. And how many businesses owned by people of color don't you find this? How many do you find that capacity? And when you hit brickstones like that the USDA has set, how can you grow? How can you grow? How can you grow when in the middle of the season, a difficult season nonetheless, you are supposed to fill out, I'm telling you, pages and pages of nonsense, of information that you should not be filling out at the time you need help, at the time you're supposed to be harvesting, at the time you're supposed to be, selling. I always tell my adult students, I say, for when I teach in classes where they are business owners, I say, if you spend more than 4-6 hours a month on your finances, you are in the wrong business. You are. Somebody should be helping you do that. You should have enough money to pay somebody to do that so that you can then interpret. But this is hard for small businesses because at the time when you are still trying to grow, you have agencies like the USDA telling you at the point where you need help that, oh, you cannot proceed because you need to be registered with your local FSA. Hello? Really? At the time I need help is the time you're telling me that my local FSA should know who I am. They should be aware of my needs. You shouldn't even be coming to me and be telling me to fill out some stupid form. You should go to my local FSA in your office in Independence Avenue and tell them to come to me and ask me what I need. You should be helping me the way Mana has helped farmers this year. I was like, I don't say this because I'm on this call. I say this because it's true. This was one of the easier aids that was for us last season, because the question was, what could you do? What could you invest in? What could you buy that would help you expand the amount of food you supply to us? That is a direct question. And so I'm thinking, if I can buy a weeding hoe, then my husband doesn't have to spend as much time weeding. Because if I say I don't, he's going to hear me and say, how many times did you ever weed? So then I thought, if we could get a caterpillar tunnel, that would help us to extend our supply up till December. And in July and August, when the crops get burned because of the heat, we could plant some things under that caterpillar tunnel. Okay. Then I'm thinking USDA, after jumping 1,000 hurdles, has said they would give us money to buy, to build a high tunnel. Well, the money they're going to give us based on their ratio, which is just not realistic, is not going to be enough for us to pay the people who are going to help us install it. How about if Mana gave me that money to install? It is easier that way. So whatever your position is, wherever you are trying to make decisions, think about it. Ask yourself, am I discriminating? Are there some people who don't have the capacity to answer the questions and to scale the hurdles that I'm asking them to scale? Are there some people like that? Yes, there are. Are they small businesses? Yes, they are. Are there businesses owned by people of color? Yes, they are. Are there businesses owned by people who are women who also have to go to do other work? Yes, they are. Then maybe you need to make it easier. We applied for a Facebook grant. It was easy. We applied for Mana, like I said, it was easy. We applied for Lowe's, the Lowe's Small Business Grant, it was easy. But everything that was brought by the USDA was like pulling teeth. And that can't be, that must not be it can't be the case. The third and final thing I want to talk about is lack of access to land. Montgomery County needs to do better. Montgomery County can do better. I told Jenna when we had the call that, a lot of people who want to start farms would rather go to Baltimore County or Prince George's County than come to Montgomery County, because Montgomery County will drive you crazy before you get land. And then when you get the land and you get a landlord that is friendly, that is good, that is nice, and one day you think, oh my God, I'm making it, I want to expand. There is nowhere to find that land. The county seems to have other priorities apart from agriculture. And unfortunately, COVID-19 has exposed the vulnerability of the greater Washington metro when it comes to food. We sell at the Silver Spring Market on Saturdays, and in DuPont on Sundays, and Crossroads on Wednesdays. Let's look at the big ones, the big deal, DuPont. How many farmers in DuPont Circle are from Maryland? How many? Maybe there are 2 or 3 of us. Now, of those from Maryland, how many are from Montgomery County? Us. Many farmers that supply us food are from West Virginia, are from Pennsylvania, are from Virginia. If the COVID crisis has taught us anything at all, it is that our food system is very, very, very vulnerable. It's scary. It is scary. And there are tons of hungry people in the county. What can we do to help farmers build capacity, give access to land? It used to amuse me, but it no longer amuses me. It irritates me. When I drive around Montgomery County and I see these lush lawns, and I'm like, this is such a waste of space. I'm not against flowers. I love flowers. I really love flowers. I do. I just don't know them. However, there are people who could do what our landlord is doing. Our landlord could really, truly not have us on her land. She has trees that can make it count like it's agricultural. And she had a lawn that was just beautiful, that made her driveway look nice. But now she has kale and spinach and all. She still says it looks nice, and I believe her. But compared to her neighbors, this is looking like a farm. What is wrong with us creating more spaces for food? What is wrong? And I know that there will be issues. It's not every landlord and tenant that would get along, like we get along well with our own. And that's why I've proposed to Montgomery County, and I'm hoping that this proposal gets to see the light of day, that we have an incubator program where people can learn, make mistakes for the first 2 years. And then afterwards, they graduate before they go take your land or take my land or take a piece of my land. So there's a less likelihood that they will mess up. So in short, my challenges, notice that I haven't talked about access to capital. No, I think access to capital is a challenge, but it is not one of the top 3 problems that I have experienced as a Black female Muslim farmer in Montgomery County or in the US at all, is allies. Who are the people that will speak for you when you're not in the room? We could use more allies. We could use more, if we want to see more Black people in the room, why don't we speak for them? Why don't we nominate them to do things that we know they can do? Why don't we, help them get access to the markets that they should get access to? People ask me, how can I help you? I say, buy from me. Don't do anything, just buy from me. If you buy from me, I would have money to do anything else that I want to do. So access to allies, access to, don't discriminate against us based on capacity. We're small, but please don't kill us. And thirdly, access to land. How can we make that better? That is my rant and my rave. Thank you.
Standing ovation. Thank you, Tope. I am just always humbled and grateful whenever you take the time to share your experience and your expertise with us. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And we do have some time for any questions or comments, anything that conversation spurred or that you're still thinking about because of our history lesson earlier. I will apologize in the middle of this conversation. I am going to have to depart for a food council event. So I want to say my gratitude now, but my colleague Wynn will take it from here. But I look forward to a robust conversation, and thank you again, Tope.
I see some questions in the chat box, and may I answer?
Yep, feel free. Yep.
Okay, so Diane said, who are your allies? What kinds of people? I think, let me give me as an example. My ally is that person who helps me kick open the doors that would otherwise be shut to people like me. For example, the DuPont Circle market is a market that is so hard to get into. Is so tough, like people are on the queue for ages. But we were able to get in because we had supplied their food hub some produce in the past, and their customers liked it. And their customers started telling them, oh, you should bring them to the market. You should bring them to the market. So when Black Lives Mattered really mattered last summer, and they wanted to bring some Black people to the market, they were like, oh, we have these Black vendors, we could bring them. And then during the market, halfway through our time in the market, we didn't even know that people were beginning to know us. So one time there was a van parked where we usually would vend. And all of a sudden they said, oh, go and stay in this place. They took us to this other place that we were like stepchildren there. But that place happened to be very good. The place, people could see us better. They didn't have to come into the parking lot. So we were like, oh, I think we should be here. I think we should be here. So I asked the market manager, one of the market managers, and said, can we stay here permanently? He said, oh no. Well, you'd have to ask Noni. Noni has the final say. Noni happens to be one of our allies in the market. So I asked him, and he was like, oh, of course, you want to be here? We'll make sure you are here. And then we found out that as customers were leaving on that day, they kept saying, can you leave Dodo Farms where they are? Because it was easier to find them today. So these are just simple examples of who allies can be. Who are you that can kick open a door for somebody else? And we all know, I've been in this country for a while. We know the doors that are shut to people like me. And so if you could leave that door open for me, hey, that would be good. Then Tope, where can we buy from you in addition to DuPont Circle Farmers Market? We would also be, and I'll put our website on the in here, and also our Instagram page. We would also be at Silver Spring Farmers Market for sure on Saturdays, farmsmd.com. But by the time we finalize our markets, we're going to put it on our website, and then we're on Instagram at Dodo Farms. That is, so since I always tell people I don't know the difference between a kale and a spinach, but I know how much they cost and I know which one is more profitable. But I also have the pleasure of keeping the social media pages. So please follow us, like us, and I always put where we are. Then thank you for this great session. I hope you share more with us to continue our mission. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you all. I think I've answered the questions, but please follow us on social media at Dodo Farms. And so, we used to offer CSAs, but it's so problematic. And I don't think we're going to do it this season. No. Do you want to be at the Sunday market? I might be able to be an ally. Oh, we're in DuPont on Sundays. Sue, thank you so much. We're in DuPont on Sundays. Thank you. Thank you. Taryn?
That was really so exciting, Tope, how you also wrote as a small business woman. I'm not a farmer, but I'm a small business person. I'm a musician here in Montgomery County. So a lot of elements of scale or having allies or a lack of allies, that all rings true, I'm sure, maybe for a good number of people here. From our little breakout group, what we earlier discussed, I might just suggest we might have other busy and active people here in the room. I'm always writing every month a letter for our community group. We also have our community garden right here in Randolph Hills by the old Rocking Horse Elementary School. So even just writing a local, very local article, or seeing if folks from Mana or you, if it's worth your while to come and hold a Zoom presentation at the next community garden. I think that would be all very good. We are all so tired of being inside and cooped up. The seed catalogs are coming in. Parents are desperate to get the kids outdoors. This might be a golden moment this next month or two to get families active and also in more support roles, whether it comes to this master gardening program that Sue Kuklewicz mentioned, or the youth gardening initiative in the country. So I think really on a micro level, like us writing for our localized neighborhood newsletters may help. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think those are all very good ideas. And, you know, I made sure that my husband was hearing this part of the conversation so that he can give me his verbal yay or nay. But I think writing in the paper, one of the things that really brought us out was actually a Washington Post. About this day last year, the Washington Post sent reporters to our farm to take pictures and to ask us about our story. And so we went on the front page of the Washington Metro, and people truly read it. Then the Montgomery County Green Business, they put our logo on some county buses. And these are things that you think people don't see, people don't hear, but people do see them. So we would really be very happy to contribute to a story in your paper. If you want to ask questions, I'll be happy to answer. I'm going to put my email in the chat box. And also, like, our farm is a private farm, so we don't usually have visitors. But if there's a space in the county where we can do something, especially before the season starts, I think that would really be very, very, very good. And yes, somebody asked, how can we advocate for you in the county? I would love for the county to have an incubator. I think that not only is that a way for us to diversify the farming community in the county, but it's also a way for us to, I think it's also a way for us to ensure our food supply. Our food supply is vulnerable. Like, Imagine us not being able to bring stuff from California, from New Mexico, from Mexico itself. We risk going hungry. And also employment. Unemployment is a big deal. And I think that if we have an incubator program, my goal for the incubator program is for it to be a United States-wide program. Again, I'm campaigning for a job at the USDA. If I got that job, the thing I would do is to, launch small incubators around the country and stuff. But on a more serious note, imagine if Montgomery County took the lead. We have the farm, we have the land, Why can't we, if somebody said, you know what, I'm going to give 25 acres of my land, of my 1,000 acres to the county to start this incubator, and we give it to five acres to different farms, and the criteria for getting 5 acres of land to farm on without paying is that you train 2 other people who are either women or young people or people of color or Native Americans, people who otherwise would not have gotten a shot. You train them, you give them half an acre out of the 5 acres we've given you for them to make their mistakes. After 2 years of them learning from you and helping you out, they can then go start their own. I think we would be ensuring the food supply in the county if we did that. So if you wanted to advocate, please tell the county that they should let us have an incubator. Sue, yes, I would like to speak at your master garden meeting.
Okay, we have a couple more minutes. Does anybody have maybe 1 or 2 more questions or even reflections or thoughts based on the smaller conversations we had earlier? We have a little bit of time for that.
So Catherine said, similarly, there's a group of Black and brown farmers with which we could connect to become allies. I am not aware of one in the county, but I'm aware that during the Future Harvest, there was a breakout session for Black and brown farmers, which I gave my email address. So I'm expecting that there will be some sort of movement going on, but I don't assume that we are many in the county, but I think statewide, there's a lot of support. But I want to say something about this. So I watched this video today that was very funny. It was a BBC video of 3 Black producers. They brought in a white person and they were making him feel like such a token, which is always the way we feel when we go to this place. They're like, oh, you're the Black person, you're the Black person, you're the Black person that we have. So I like the alliances of Black and brown people. I like it, of women farmers, I like that. But I also like us to belong to a bigger group, to be seen and to be represented and to be heard in a bigger group like this. So that it's not like we're in a silo somewhere and we're just screaming, which is what happens most of the time. We're screaming and nobody's really hearing us. So when we can have the opportunity to be a part of larger groups, I welcome it, I appreciate it. So both works actually. Are we involved in farm to school? Farm to school, I know there was a time my husband went to, when the world was normal, he was invited, it was a Montgomery County school, I believe, where he went to do some demonstrations, and we were supposed to do another one in Virginia in June, but the world went upside down, so.
Well, thank you so much, Tope, for sharing your story. I know it's been really impactful for me, and I'm sure others feel similarly. And Tope put her email in the chat, so it sounds like if you're interested in reaching out further, that would be a great way to do that. So for those who are familiar, at the end of Breaking Bread every month, we wrap up by making commitments. So, Tope gave us a couple different ways that we can move forward and take actionable steps or find out more about agriculture. But the point of making the commitments is asking the question of what are you willing to do in the next month to create new solutions or explore the underlying causes of hunger or food security in Montgomery County. So we'll meet next month. And as Jenna mentioned, this is just part one of the conversation. So in the next 30 days, how can you explore some of the ideas that we talked about today more deeply, or just in general about food security and food justice in Montgomery County? It doesn't have to be something big. It can just be a small step towards something bigger. So I'm going to open up the floor and anyone can jump in and share any actionable items that they would like to work on in the next 30 days.
I can start. So everyone, my name's Katie. I'm a dietetic intern, and I kind of thought of two things. So one thing I shared in my breakout room was being a white person coming from a small town. The history that I learned in high school was very whitewashed, and I'm much more interested in learning about actual Black history and the real history and the ugly history, and just, you know, removing myself from my toxic hometown and broadening, you know, my mind. So one thing is diving deep into the actual facts of, you know, the United States. And second, I have some connections with Farm to School, and that's why I asked that question. So I think I'm going to reach out to my connection and see if they need any more farmers, and maybe we can get something in coordinates there. But thank you so much. This is awesome.
So I'm Robin Ritterhoff, and my most immediate action, I think I'm unmuted, but I'm not sure if I'm actually sounding. Okay. My most immediate action is that tomorrow night I host my church's racial justice book discussion group. My church is a national cathedral, so many people come from DC, some people come from Maryland, some people come from Virginia. And now that church is online, we had a bunch of people last time from, I'm really not sure where they came from. The book that we're reading this month and talking about, fantastic book, Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man by Emmanuel Acho. And Emmanuel Acho devotes a chapter of his book to implicit bias and being allies, becoming allies. And so I've been turning over in my mind how I can be a better ally. And Tope has provided a whole bunch of examples, which is fantastic. So I'm going to think about how to be a good ally to farmers in my county. Thank you, Tope.
My name is Cynthia Wilson, and I work for Mammoth Food Center. I think this conversation for me was just so enlightening. I learned so many things about agriculture that I didn't know, about racism in agriculture that I didn't know and understand. And I think one of the biggest things that has become really important to me, I think within the last several years, is expanding my knowledge on Black issues. And especially as February is Black History Month, the combination of agriculture and food is really important to me to kind of understand more, kind of like Katie is saying, dive deeper and figure out ways that I can support my community. And I think through that, one of the biggest things I've been thinking about recently is the power of the word of tongue, of just spreading this information, talking to people I know, talking to other Black and Brown people, and you know, kind of setting up this chain of information so that we can really support each other. And I think that's probably one of my biggest things I'm going to work on right now, is to learn more, to do more exploration of agriculture and how it affects Black and Brown communities, but also just sharing this information with other people I know, because I think there are so many people that want to support this work. And Tope, like, I'm so inspired just by listening to you talk. So I just really want to share the information.
Yeah, to build on Cynthia's, I think I also would like to share the information from today and find out more information on my own, in addition to focusing more about myself as a consumer, and really making sure I think deeply about where I'm buying things when I have the choice to buy from people of color, and knowing now that there's so much discrimination in that process, and even just what you were talking about, like in the farmers market, and how people don't think about it and just go to what they trust or whatever inherent biases we have. So for me, I really want to focus on that as a consumer, knowing that those choices do matter.
I'm Brazil Robinson, and I work at Interfaith Works and am the liaison program director for our Emergency Assistance Coalition. And the coalition provides services to people in need in the community. And there are providers who are distributing food, giving out food, and whether they're food cards or actual have food pantries. But I think that most of the time they may not, and most of us are not thinking about these equity issues around the food that we're giving out and the food that we're trying to get to people in need, and issues of food justice as well. And I think that's a very important topic that I might want to see, find opportunities for exploring that and covering that. When we talk about the food that we eat and the food that we make a great deal of effort to get to people to address food insecurity, just getting a bigger picture of all those connections.
I just wanted to build a little bit on some of what was already mentioned. Some of what Wynn said was really kind of what struck me as part of Tope, your presentation about the farmers markets, and if people are passing by, if they don't trust the product, and sometimes it's just not about the product, it's about people. So I really loved that point, and want to work on trying to, of course, put your dollars where for the ideas you actually support. So I really agreed with Wynn and wanted to just build on that a little bit about echoing the point of, in your role, in what you're doing, what can you do, and what are you maybe doing right now that is discriminatory. So I think I'm going to look at the work that I do at MANA and try to see if, with school-based programs, how we're providing food, just taking a step back and looking at what types of practices we're doing and where I can improve, to kind of pull more people into the conversation and really just ask the questions that are, that have simple answers. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Priya, and thanks everyone who shared their commitments. We're just out of time, so we're going to wrap up. But like Jenna's mentioned, next month we will be having part 2 of this conversation, more of a celebration, which is really exciting. And hopefully in the beginning, we'll be able to come back together and share our progress on these intentions and commitments. So I'm looking forward to that. And thank you again, Tope, for such a great presentation. I know that we all really enjoyed it, so thank you. We will be meeting the 3rd Wednesday of the month in February, and we will be sending out a recording of this session as well in case you'd like to share it, or go back and look at the information again. So thank you all so much for being here today.
Thank you all.
Thank you.